One of the things that you write about eloquently in the book is the utility, the short-term and long-term utility of having good communication skills as a country, about being able to tell our own story, about being able to sort of participate in ideological combat, trying to win the argument around the world, particularly against rising authoritarianism. And you write with some regret about how some of those skills, some of those ways that we do that as a country have been defunded and weakened over time. Because of that, I wanted to ask you about this recent controversy, very recent controversy involving Voice of America. Voice of America is an interesting part of the U.S. sort of quiver. In that regard, they are independently, editorially independent, but they're obviously part of the U.S. government. We've had the president install somebody who's perceived as a real ideological loyalist there, and we just had the director and assistant director resign suddenly, and they're apparently not being replaced, at least not yet. Are you worried about VOA? Are you worried about those types of capacities of the U.S. government during the Trump presidency?
I'm worried that our entire strategic communications capability has been dramatically weakened since the end of the Cold War. You know, in the late 1990s, because of budgetary and other reasons, the U.S. Congress eliminated the United States Information Agency. This was an agency under Ronald Reagan and John F. Kennedy and Dwight Eisenhower, under leaders like Edward R. Murrow and Charlie Wick in the Reagan administration, had enormous influence and enormous reach around the world. And one of the reasons that VOA was so important was that people around the world in Eastern Europe and in the Soviet Union, when they could get VOA, believed it gave them an honest, objective view of what was going on in the world. The VOA also would report what was going on in the United States. And the truth is, most presidents really got annoyed by what VOA said about what was going on in the United States, because it was often very revealing about and very honest about problems we had here internally. But it had a great deal of credibility around the world. And there were other radios, and originally operated by CI, like Radio Free Liberty, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and others. All of those have basically been dismantled. And so when you have a country like China that has a global communication strategy, and they've invested billions and billions of dollars in it, in acquiring networks and broadcasting to every country in the world, and owning networks in various countries and so on. We don't have anything comparable to that today. And in this rivalry we have with China going forward, we're going to need these kinds of tools, because if we're lucky and we're smart, we can avoid a military conflict with China. But that means that the rivalry will take place using the non-military instruments of power, and strategic communications is one of the most important. The Chinese have enormous assets in taking this on. We're very limited at this point, and that's why these controversies, but also the lack of funding and frankly, the lack of imagination and aggressiveness in using our strategic communications capabilities is so bothersome to me. I mean, why haven't we been more aggressive in telling the Iranian people about the corruption of their leadership? Why haven't we told the Russians? You know, the Russians interfere with our politics all the time and try to divide us and stuff. Why aren't we going into the Russians, getting past their firewalls and talking about the corruption of Putin and his henchmen? We just don't do that kind of thing. And frankly, it's going to be very necessary going forward in the world. And we're at a disadvantage because we've basically eliminated or reduced dramatically the funding for almost all these non-military instruments of power. That's really what the book's about.
And you speak from It is what the book's about. And you speak about it from an incredibly authoritative position, having been Secretary of Defense to two different presidents, talking about the erosion of non-military forms of power. It's just a unique and really public-spirited perspective that I'm grateful to hear more about. Former Defense Secretary Robert Gates, thank you so much for taking time to be here. Again, the book is called Exercise of Power, American Failures, Successes, and a New Path Forward in the Post-Cold War World. Good luck with it, sir. Thanks again for being here. Come back anytime.
Thank you very much.